Hey everyone, this time on Tim Talks Audio, we go over how to hook up your external headphone amp. When you're working with clients inside your home studio or professional studio, making sure your artist has the right headphone mix is essential for them to get into the vibe of recording. It's very different from listening in a control room, and sometimes what they want to hear isn't what you, as the engineer, need to hear. I already have a video out going over how to set up your I/O for a Q mix. Now let's go ahead and take a look at the physical connections needed to get signals to your headphone amp. First, let's go over the additional hardware that you're going to need to set up your external headphone amp for your Q mixes. First, you'll need the headphone amp itself. There's many kinds out there. The one I have today is the Behringer HA400. This thing is dead simple. It's just a stereo in and 4 headphone outs. But you can still send a separate mix. It's the same mix to all 4, but it doesn't have to be the same thing we're listening to in the control room. There's so many different headphone Q mix amps out there that you'll have to figure out which one is going to suit your needs. Like I said, this is just stereo in, but if I was working in a bigger studio like I have, we have multi-track headphone amp ins where the artist can make their own mix on a little mixer that they get, whether it be from an Ethernet connection or any other type of USB connection. They'll have their own individual mix that they can dial. Right now, we're going to go over how to do it inside the DAW and something really simple. Then after you figure out which headphone amp you need, you're going to need probably the most important thing in any studio, cables. What you may need for your headphone amp is going to vary. For our example today, I am going to be using a dual 1/4 inch to headphone size. So this is 1/8 inch or 3.5 millimeter jack. This is what I need. In addition to this cable, I'm also going to be using an 1/8 inch to 1/4 inch adapter. This way, I can put it right into my headphone amp. This is just the cable I had laying around, and I had the adapter. They do make 1/4 inch TRS to dual mono cables out there. Those are usually called Y cables as well. If you have one of the bigger systems out there, you might need one of these cables, dual 1/4 inch cables. This can be either TRS, just like this one, or TS, because it is just going to be a mono signal coming out of your interface. And then it's going to be a mono signal into your headphone receiver. The headphone receiver then will put things into stereo depending on the mix that's made there. Also, depending on your headphone distribution, you might need more cables than that. And take a look at what your system needs. It could be 1/4 inches, and you might also be D-sub. Okay, now before you go hooking everything up, you need to think about your physical connections. If you just have your main speakers for your control room and you want to do a stereo mix for headphones, you only need to pick a different set of outputs from your interface. Mine's going to look a little bit different because I have a feed going to you guys, a feed going to my mains, and what we're going to set up today, the feed going to the headphones. So let's take a look at the physical connections. Okay, so we're looking at the back of the Presonus Studio 1824C. You can see I have my main outs connected here, and then I have the feed to you guys connected right here. This is part of my setup, and yours is going to vary slightly, so don't worry about these ones right now. The feed going to you guys is going out of 3 and 4, and the feed going to my mains is coming out the main out. This could also be 1 and 2 if you really wanted. For the headphone amp, we're going to take outputs 5 and 6 and go right into the input. It's a stereo input on my headphone amp. So let's go here, stereo input, and we'll make our left and right connections. So that's it. That's all the physical connections we need. Of course, have your headphones plugged in and dial your volume control as you or the artist sees fit. Okay, so we've made all of our physical connections. Now let's double check everything inside of our session. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to my I/O setup underneath your song setup. In outputs, if you don't already have an output created, create a stereo output. Then what you're going to want to do is you're going to want to select the outputs you're using to feed your headphone amp. In this case, I'm using 5 and 6, and I already have it selected. Then, if you're doing recording or tracking or any kind of early production things, you're going to want to hit QMix, and this will just listen to the input tracks inside Studio One. It's not a dedicated output that can mirror your main outs. That's what I have set up for you guys for the feed and for my mains, but because we're creating a headphone mix for recording purposes, I am going to turn on QMix. Once you have it set up to your system, and yours is going to look different than this, just hit apply when needed and OK. If this was your first time setting up a headphone mix and turning on QMix, you'll see on all of your tracks that you have created, or the ones you will create, this QMix option down here. It might be squished down a little like this, and all you have to do is grab the top edge and drag it up. Also, by default, the little lock will be on because it's going to stay connected to the main fader feeding your control room. You can see with the lock here, the send to the headphone out is mimicking what this fader is doing. But if I want a separate isolated mix, I can turn the lock off, just like I've done on this channel, and if I go down, it doesn't change how much is feeding the headphone. Now what I'm going to do is switch over to Presonus's Universal Control. That is the control software for this interface, and it also works for a lot of their other interfaces as well. Whatever your interface is, you might want to check its control software for the next few steps. So I'm looking at the mixer now inside Universal Control for the 1824C. You can see my microphone here. Hey, how's it going? And you can also see the DAW send over here. You may need to navigate to the DAW outputs because right now I have the ADAT section turned off. This way I can show you guys a little bit easier. By default, these faders will all be at 0, but I've already gone ahead and done this step already. This fader right here is the main mix feeding outputs 1 and 2, so my control room. DAW3 is the feed to you guys, which I use for these recordings and for streams. And DAW5 is the output we just connected for our headphone amp. Now you'll notice that I have these faders all the way down. I don't need to hear in the control room what is being fed to the headphone amp, because I know what I've done is set it up inside Studio One to the artist's liking, and I don't need to hear it. But if you needed to reference, you could come over here, mute your output, and solo the output going to the headphones. This is how you can listen to what they are listening to. Then what you'll need to do is actually check the mix going to the outputs that you have selected. Today, we've used outputs 5 and 6, so I'm going to select 5 and 6. And you can see the mix is very similar, but I don't have the main outs or the feed going to you guys up at all. But I do have the main of the headphone out at 0, so there is no restriction. Also, the headphones are getting my microphone as well. If your outputs are getting way too much signal and it sounds like it's distorting, you might be sending too many copies of the outputs to those headphones. When I first set all this up, that's exactly what I had. So I came into Universal Control and I dropped the main DAW output as well as the other ones that weren't part of this set of outputs. So now let's switch back to Studio One. Now let's double check everything we did. Right now I'm going to hit play and it's going to come out of my main speakers and you guys are going to get an exact copy of what I'm listening to.
Kick up the roots from the old ground. Kick up the roots from the old ground. The deadbeat ideas don't mean nothing to me. Leave the one always down.
So there we go. We've confirmed everything is going where it should be. Main output is going out, my main outputs. Sub 1 in my case, because that's just the name of it, is the feed going to you guys. And then I've named it as headphone out right here. And it is going right to outputs 5 and 6. We can confirm that by coming up here and just looking at where the check mark is. This is outputs 5 and 6. On your outputs, you are able to put some processing on the inserts or on the post. So if you feel like you need to, go ahead and put a little processing, maybe a limiter so you're not blowing anybody's ears out. That might save some ears. Like I said earlier, I already have a video going over how to set up your I/O, and it is just a guideline. Everybody's I/O is going to be a little bit different because we all have different interfaces out there. So use that video as a guide, but also know what you need to do for your interface. Also, I hope this guide helped you out. And if you have any questions, put them in the comments below, and we can all help each other because everybody's working with a different setup. And what we've gone over today is just a guide. You might need a little bit more help with your setup. That's all for now. If you found anything informative, please like and share the video. For more, visit timflansbaum.com. And if you have a question, ask it in the comments, and I'll answer it in a future video. Thanks for watching.